want to ask, I might cover your question while I'm talking to you. Let me ask, get a little information, then you solve the question you just asked me. So the water softening plant is where we're standing. We're all the way forward right here. So you make your way back, and we're going to be going on the floor
below the water level.
Starting with the water all the way to the propellers and all that. So this water softening plant was to condition the water to be used in the boilers themselves. They carried fresh water on the ship. They filled with fresh water every time they stopped in North America or Europe. And then they would distill, you can see the photograph right here. They would distill about 25 tons of fresh water through this room every single hour. The distillery, just like liquor distillery, they're purifying it. The water used in the boilers had to be more pure than the drinking water on the ship, and that was to prevent any mineral buildup. So different water softness content on either side of the Atlantic, so they had to make sure everything was uniform. So keep in mind they would have been using salt water for nearly everything except for drinking and in the boilers. So washing, bathing, swimming, the pools were all filled with salt water, heated salt water. So basically, again, just drinking and boilers was for the fresh water. They had saltwater intake pumps. They also had desalinization, which means they remove the salt from water if necessary. But generally, the fresh water used in the boilers and for drinking was brought on the ship in advance. So we're gonna head into boiler room number 1. Did you still have a question? Did you still have a question? If you had a question, I'm happy to answer it. You had a question? What's your question? Yes, a very good question. In fact, I was just about to answer that. So you're going to see up there where that where the red meets the white, that is the water line. So we're about 21 feet below the water line. Basically, right where the ceiling is, right here. That's the water. Disembodied voice. It's a haunted boiler system. So
But it's leaking.
we're standing in boiler room number 1. Boiler room number 1 is unique among the 5 boiler rooms for a few reasons on the Queen Mary. 5 boiler rooms, 27 boilers. This boiler room up here, boiler room number 1, was the smallest of the boiler rooms. It only had 3 boilers in it, and they were a different type of boiler than the rest used on the ship. So the other 4 boiler rooms with 6 boilers each, all what were called Yarrow boilers. The 3 boilers used in this room were called Scotch boilers, and they were slightly more primitive, lower pressure boilers, and they were the auxiliary boilers, if anybody's familiar with that term. Really for the smaller electrical parts of the ship, appliances, lighting, things like that, as opposed to the 24 Yarrow boilers were used for the heavy duty sort of components of the ship, including propulsion, hydraulics, things like that. So these 3 boilers, they were cylinders, about 22 foot by 17 foot, and they burned about 250 pounds per square inch, the pressure content, inside the boilers. The pressure content in the other 24 boilers, 400 pounds per square inch. So much more modern and higher pressure boiler that's used for the propulsion of the ship. The boilers on the Queen Mary ran not on coal, but what's called bunker C fuel oil. So that is basically the thick gelatinous leftover when they're done making diesel and gasoline. So this fuel they used, so thick that they had to heat it slightly just to get it soft enough to put into the tank. And they were typically carrying about 8,600 tons of that fuel oil. Bunker C fuel oil, interestingly enough, during World War II, they eventually experimented with it with flamethrowers. So the Americans were constantly, like all the other sides, changing their weapons throughout the war. They started the war, the American flamethrower had a more misty kind of fuel that they used. Bunker C fuel oil, they found, sprayed in globules. So it was more consistent, the stream, further, and as awful as the sounds, it would stick to the target, so it became more effective. Eventually, they transitioned from Bunker C fuel oil to napalm, once that was invented at the end of the war, which is what it would be now. So, we're gonna continue. Watch out for the leak, and don't worry, that is not coming in from the ocean or anything like that. We have condensation down here quite a bit. So if you all could direct your attention, well, first and foremost, we're standing now in boiler room number 2. So take a look down here. I mentioned Cunard took all their boilers when they brought the ship to Long Beach. These tracks, oh, that's our horn. So you can hear it all the way down here. That'll go off again at 6. Don't be standing right next to it, trust me. So right here is where they would hook the sleighs that the boilers sat on. They were able to replace them and did replace them a few times throughout the year. Kind of like car parts, they could swap them out once they wore down. So these tracks, once again, they would hook the sleigh in there to keep them nestled there. And then right here is an airlock. So I mentioned the boilers were pressurized themselves, all boilers are. The boiler rooms themselves were pressurized. So about 1/4 pound per square inch. And that's why they had to cross through these airlocks. Once again, the water line up here. And we're standing below the forward funnel. There are 3 funnels on the ship. That's also where they pulled out all of the boilers in the late 60s when they brought the ship to Long Beach. Cunard came in and scrapped out, scrapped the boiler system, and they lifted them on cranes through the funnels. The funnels we currently have on the ship are not the original ones. They're aesthetic. So the original ones, when they brought it to Long Beach, they were unable to salvage them. They found it was just layer after layer of lead paint, basically, stacked on top of each other. So they just tore down the old funnels and added the new ones to preserve the look of the Queen Mary, of course. So, we'll continue.
It doesn't feel right down here. It's kind of scary.
Very claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Being down here 100 years ago.
You guys should really look at that photo. I always forget to show that, but and feel free to at any point. So the room we're standing in right here, originally the Queen Mary's forward turbo generator, combined output about 91 kilowatts. So one of the main reasons she's called City at Sea, or Floating City. You can tell which of this is original, most of it's original. The flux capacitor here was added for some mad scientists, Halloween thing they had. This room, interestingly enough, they wouldn't have been down here. I think I mentioned this, but all these walkways were added for the museum years later. The walkways that the workers would have used, you're going to see above us throughout the port. Terrifying, right? Look at how narrow they are.
Wow.
It would have taken probably 10 times the amount of time to get from one end of the ship to the other through the boiler rooms that way, with these up and down, zigzagging, winding pathways. The
Wow.
boilers
They didn't have this
themselves
before.
were more
I
or
know.
less.
They used to climb on there.
It wouldn't have been so open and echoey in here. We'd be basically walking through aisles and crevices to get between the boilers. You can see in that photo, and I'm not sure if it's still up there or not. It would be amazing if it was, but there's a control, and feel free to go if you want to go back there for a minute. But there's a control panel up here. So the workers would have been up here. This room inside here was added for that Halloween thing. It looks very authentically old, but that's all, there's a props in there. So you can see all this stuff. And right up here, see this big white mass here? Anyone want to venture guess what that is? That's the pool. That's right, good guess.
That's what I was gonna say.
I believe you. I knew you were going to say the pool. It's the bottom of the first class swimming pool. So you're not looking at the very bottom. There would be about 5 feet of space between the bottom of the pool, or where we're looking, and where the water was. And the pools were filled, drained and refilled on a daily basis, both of them with heated salt water. They heated the water. See, when I first started working here, most people say, oh, that's great. So they put the pool above the turbo generator in the boiler rooms, and then it will heat the pool. That's how they did it. Like a frying pan, right? It was a little bit more complicated than that. They fed that salt water through tubes in the condensers themselves, and just the superheated steam around that would heat the pipes, and it was a long system of pipes, and then they'd run the water through that, and just the heated pipes touching the steam would heat the pool. So they you know, made use of that heat energy that wouldn't have been used otherwise. See, that was really the Queen Mary's thing, is recycling everything. And I don't mean in an environmental kind of sense. In a, within the ship itself. They recycled everything. Lubrication oil, the water used on the ship, the energy, the heat. They found a use for every little thing. So, we'll continue. And right here we are standing in boiler room. Oh, I'm sorry. I gotta wait till. It's actually really difficult to hear people in between the bulkheads here. It's interesting because if you're on a tour in this part of the ship and you're all the way in the back, even without the doors closed, as soon as you walk through there, it's like a wall of sound and you just don't hear much anymore. So we're standing in boiler room number 3. You're going to see a great example of the catwalks used. You're going to see a modern Tesla coil here, world's largest civilian Tesla coil, which we use for this Halloween exhibit. So apparently you can bring a light bulb in here and it will light the light bulb just by being you know, in the same room as it. So you're going to see on either side of boiler room number 3, 2 of the 4 stabilizers that were added to the ship in 1958. Relatively late in the Queen Mary's career. They had a problem with all of that movement she experienced with the storms and whatnot. So stabilizers are essentially these hydraulic arms that extend on the side of the ship to prevent her from rolling too much. Apparently they didn't solve the problem, they helped with it a little bit. All modern cruise ships are built with stabilizers. Some of you may have seen that news report from about 3 months ago, that Norwegian cruise liner that lost its stabilizers. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured, but it's really terrifying when you see the footage from inside the ship. They're dodging couches and pianos as they're sliding back and forth, and they had to get a helicopter and airlift everybody off the ship because it was just completely uninhabitable at that point. So, you'll see the 2 stabilizers there, so we're going to see another 2 in boiler room number 4.
Thank the Lord.
Here come the whispers, I can hear you.
The exit's right there, and I really, you know, that sound is creepy. I don't like sounds like that.
Yeah, but not too much. Apparently it was pretty close. They ran through stuff. You know, there weren't going to be fish swimming in there, but it was pretty raw when you got it. Boiler room number 4, right here. Some of you guys may be surprised to see the space between the 2 hulls. So yes, there are 2 hulls in the Queen Mary. We have what's called a double hull. So right here, you're looking at about a little over an inch of steel, 10 feet of space, and then a second hull. And that goes for below us too. So this entire time you might think, oh, this is the final layer between us and the ocean. No, there's a whole another hull. That is where they would have stored the 8,600 tons of bunker sea fuel oil they had on the ship when they filled it up. So all the fuel tank would have just been in the side, in the double hull of the ship. We're going to see 2 more stabilizers right here on either side. And when you guys are ready. MD?
Yeah, I was in the ditch. Welcome people.
I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest. It might be some really technical engineering term. So we could probably fit everyone on here. If we can't, we'll take 2 trips. So don't, make yourself feel claustrophobic. But
I want to go.
Totally.
Baby outfit.
Yay! Happy days. That room there would have been originally the aft turbo generator room. Slightly larger with a similar room. So, this place was, or is, standing in the exhibition hall, so they've converted this. We would be standing, basically if this was still the way the ship originally was, we'd be floating at the top of boiler room number 5, and then the forward engine room. So this has all been heavily modified. It's not the way it originally was. So this floor is not original at all. Now they just have events here, proms, parties.
Thank you.
These are the Titanic. That's it didn't sink, it just moved. This is a 16-ton anchor that was used on the Queen Mary. It was a spare anchor, but it has seen use, so this has been to the bottom. We had several anchors, so it's very delicate though, so be careful. You can see right here an original White Star, White Star light. So that is not one that was used on the Titanic, but it's the same type. And that's real, that's not a problem. You can touch that. Really great piece of history. Feel free to take your time in this area after the tour. We are going to go down to the engine room.
As big as this is, only two rows of people fit there.
2 rows? That's all?
Well, yeah, there's only two seats.
Are we going under the water level again? Because I didn't like that. I don't like going under the water level.
down here.
Just to get everyone. Take a look. You got condenser circulating pumps. I just like to point this out. 25,000 gallons per minute. So imagine if it was running and you put your hand on it, what it would probably feel like, that vibration and everything. The condensers themselves, and what a condenser is for everybody, it's condensing the steam. So it's taking the leftover steam when it's done with the turbines and converting it back into fresh water to be used in the water softening plant and start the whole process over. So these big green boxes on either side of the room are the condensers, and it's also where they would have had those pipes, and that's how they heated the salt water for the pools. So they would run them through I think miles actually of piping in there, and then by the time the water was done with salt water to reach the pool, it was nice and warm for the customers. What do you think of this wrench right here?
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's a wrench.
Yeah. I think for 3 guys to carry it.
I'm gonna climb over this, but just me. This I can show you guys this. You're looking at the control panel that would have controlled this entire engine room. So this is one of 2 engine rooms we had on the Queen Mary. So 2 engine rooms.